Hey everybody, and welcome to the last IT podcast in the world where we talk about IT business, apparently international news, and anything else we find interesting. I'm David Wheat. He's Darrick. Hey, Darrick.
Hey.
We're wearing hats again, but people don't care. I'm back to the Wheat Farrier Works hat. If you need quality horseshoeing or horse training in northern Arizona, contact my niece from Wheat Farrier Works. You're doing a repeat?
Yep, back to the Richmond Flying Squirrels with the cartoonishly big-headed squirrel.
Cartoonishly big-headed Richmond Flying Squirrel from the minor league baseball team. Good. Hey, it's good to have you back. Last episode, if your listener didn't catch last episode where I interviewed a CNN journalist from the UK, go back and check that out. But there were some big firsts for the pod in that episode, Darrick. What did you notice that were first? And I'll start with the first. It was the first time you weren't on the podcast.
Yeah.
Missed you, buddy. So what else did you notice?
By the way, it's kind of fun to listen to and not be on it and just hear it organically. And very interesting podcast. If you haven't seen that one, do it because or listen to it. It's really good. First guest host, kind of alluded to that. First international guest.
Good.
Let's see.
It's been all dudes up till last episode.
Yeah. First female guest.
Yep. First female international. We could beat that.
Probably I'm guessing one of the younger, first, what would that be? Generation Zoomer, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I've lost track.
Definitely not Boomer, X, or Millennial, probably.
Yeah, kind of the first interview format, first journalist. We could go on and on, but first female, first person probably younger than us, first guest. And by the way, Ryan Reynolds, you blew it. You could have been the first guest way back.
Yeah.
We were
huge missed opportunity,
Ryan. But Anna Kubin from CNN gets the never to be replaced first guest on the last IT podcast in the world. Also, by the way, did you notice anything about my hat? Wasn't wearing one.
Oh, very professional.
It felt wrong with our British cousins to wear the hat, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm fine with my Texas brethren down there, but felt a little wrong. Anyway, yeah.
First naked scalp was,
Really enjoyed it. Glad we got to do that. Go check it out if you want. Darrick, there's an event happening in my neck of the woods here in northern Colorado that I think you're very excited about because you stan this organization. But there is a Buc-ee's, BUC-EE''S being built in northern Colorado right now, opens in March of 2024. And for those people who don't know what a Buc-ee's is, I'm going to have you explain it to them. And don't forget, we have international listeners. So what's a Buc-ee's? And why should I be excited about it?
So Buc-ee's is a magical gas station. It is the biggest gas station you'll ever see.
I'm going to stop you right there. I was not expecting the words gas station to follow the words magical, but please do tell.
You wouldn't think so, but you get there and you'll see.
Okay.
So first of all, enormous amount of gas pumps available.
Mm-hmm.
Now, typically, there's different permutations of Buc-ee's, and we can get into that. But the baseline Buc-ee's that is what draws attention and what draws fans is these large complexes, lots and lots of gas pumps, and immaculate bathrooms. So you're on a road trip with your family. Great place to stop for that. Huge, clean, safe bathrooms. They don't allow any trucks in Buc-ee's, so it is only passenger vehicles.
It's not a truck stop. It's a car stop.
Yeah, trucks are banned. They will kick you out if you're in a truck. So apologies to our trucker friends who I'm sure feel very bad about that, and I feel for them, but it's kind of their niche for Buc-ee's is that it's just going to be travelers.
Plus, they're trying to keep those bathrooms clean. No offense also.
Yeah.
But by the way, can we just pause for a second? First of all, some numbers. The one in northern Colorado here was going to be the largest Buc-ee's in the world, and that's the way we say things in America. Everybody
yeah.
They're only in America, but
The
it
Kansas
was
City
going to be the
Chiefs are the
largest.
world
But
champions of
yeah,
the
it
football.
rapidly got supplanted by one in Texas, of course. By the way, Buc-ee's originated in Texas, I believe, where everything's bigger.
Yes. Yep.
And some would say better. I wouldn't say, but some would
better.
say. This Buc-ee's is going to have 120 gas pumps. I mean, we're not talking a medium-large facility. We're talking about an enormous facility.
Yeah, it's huge. And then the inside is that's great. Lots of gas pumps. You won't wait for a pump, even on a busy travel day on a big highway.
What am I going to find inside? So just real quickly, is it a sad state of American life that your number one calling card, if you're a new business, is your bathrooms are clean? I mean, shouldn't you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I would also, I think, to give them credit. You're right. I would also give them credit. They're not just clean. They're like nice. They're big. They're fairly well. What's the term?
Appointed?
Like, not very well appointed. Exactly.
They have good accoutrement.
Nice. They're comfortable. There's a lot of space to walk. You're not bumping into people in there.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
A far cry from what you could have.
What else? Once you make a beeline to the bathroom and see what Darrick is talking about, and then you go to the rest of the enormous store. By the way, ours is going to be 74,000 square feet inside.
Right.
Now, because we're an international audience, and I want you to tell me what's filling up this massive space, but that is 1.3 times the size of an NFL football field. Mm-hmm. It is 1.4 times the size of a Premier League soccer, I'm going to call it that, pitch. And it's about 0.45% of a cricket pitch, which is enormous. So I'm putting these units in
international dimensions
for our international audience. That's how big the inside of this magical gas station is. So once I emerge from this incredible bathroom and I'm blown away, Darrick, what am I going to do spending my time inside of this 74,000 foot magical gas station?
Yeah, you are in snack and food and touristy item. About a third of the store is kind of touristy collectibles, kind of a mix of Hobby Lobby and like an airport store where you'd get like items, if we're in Texas. So lots of look, I'm in Texas. Here's a Buc-ee shirt. Here's that home decor, stuffed animals, swimming, depending on the season, swimming stuff. So about a third of the store is that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And on the other end of the other third of the store on the far end is going to be like snack goods. So drinks, bottled drinks, chips, sauces, beef jerky, all that kind of things you would expect at a gas station, but a huge selection. And then the middle is kind of a fresh food, made to order food section. So one of their hallmarks is their barbecue station. When they get a new brisket out, it's a ceremony. They bring out the brisket, slap it on the board.
Do they ring a bell or something?
They chant and say brisket on the board, and everybody says whoop. Wow. All the employees say whoop, and to go get some fresh brisket sandwiches over there. They have like a fudge bar that's pretty large. Like you can get, made to order fudge selections, sandwiches, kolaches, which is a big thing in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Now, we forgot to mention the mascot. Can you sort of like verbally explain the mascot for Buc-ee's?
Yeah. So Buc-ee's, they'll have statues of Buc-ee on there. He's a beaver. He's got a little hat on. Like they'll have bronze statues in front of the larger ones. It's like a little bit.
It's close to the big-headed squirrel on your cap right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a buck-toothed, beavery teethed beaver, animated cartoon beaver with a red hat on.
Yeah. One of the things you're supposed to get on their snack selection is called beaver nuggets that they're famous for. I'd rather have the brisket, but it's like a puffed corn.
I mean, the enthusiasm just welling up in your voice makes me want to go. But we have to admit though, this is quintessential America. Yeah. Where it's the place you can't wait to get to happens to be a gas station with what certainly our European friends would not consider haute cuisine, probably.
No.
All right, I'm excited, Anything else I should know before I go to Buc-ee's? Definitely get there at the right time for brisket, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's always the right time for brisket. They'll always have brisket on the board, I think, anytime after noonish. They can get crowded. So the ones by us, like there's some where I love Buc-ee's, but it's almost overrun, like on a busy travel weekend, and the amount of people there, as large as it is still kind of too much, and you might want to skip it. But
okay, all right. Well,
so
it opens
Memorial
in
Day
March.
weekend. Get there before Memorial Day weekend. Don't try to hit it up then.
Maybe we should do like a live stream from Buc-ee's sometime, and I can. Anyway, all right. Good to know. Buc-ee's, gigantic gas station, clean bathrooms. Oh, I was going to say, what's the largest drink probably for our European friends that you could get at a Buc-ee's? In ounces.
Gosh.
More than 64? More than 72?
It might be like, do they have more than 64? Do they have I hadn't looked at their offerings. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's almost a liter. You couldn't believe the size of cups you can buy in America. So, all right. Well, good. That's Buc-ee's and the banter. And we're going to talk about this concept in IT called Agile when we come back. We've got a couple of interesting slants on it. It's not as dry as you think it's going to be. So join us right back after the break. Thanks, everybody.
Time for the segment called The Big Idea. The Big Idea. The Big Idea. Serious topic, but we'll still have fun. We'll still have fun with The Big Idea.
Better IT, hands in the air cause we like IT, that's great. I'm not a famous rapper, but I can help you with technology. I can
hey everybody,
show you how
welcome
to pick
back
software.
to the last IT podcast in the world with David and Darrick. Hey Darrick, we're going to talk today about this concept in IT from a couple of angles, and I want people to hang on. We're going to have your angle, and then I'm going to follow with my angle because it's a different use case for different things. But at this word agile, or agile, depending on who you are, I suppose. But agile, or the agile methodology, and what it is and why it is, and those kinds of things. So it started off in developer land, coders and code software-based projects, but it's morphed into other areas, which is what I'm going to talk about. But why don't you do sort of the intro and tell us a little bit about Agile and your experience with it, and just go from there.
Yeah. So my first job, we didn't have Agile yet. My first job out of college, and we were kind of a process free. I think it was still people still figuring out how to do process around software development, because it's not quite like a big construction project with Gantt charts and all that. But you still, as teams get bigger, projects get bigger, more dollars get involved, you do need planning and structure around that. So I've been places that is a reaction, I think, to either the lack of process of just do the next thing. We don't really have a plan, which doesn't usually end well, or sort of the heavy project management, huge Gantt charts, big, we'll make a huge plan for 6 months or 2 years worth of work, and we're just going to go put our heads down and then do it. And we'll hopefully, we all come out right at the end.
Yeah. Just real quick, this is a key point. I don't mean to cut you off, but really key point, because what people learned was software is not like launching a rocket to the moon.
Right.
Or building a skyscraper.
Right.
Which required different but those project methodologies had just sort of become the way software was developed originally.
Exactly.
And I'm going to briefly, lots of front-end planning, a lot of artifacts. I'm going to have you talk about artifacts, because that's an IT word, but lots of like, you have to think of everything up front that you're going to do, and then you commence to the work, and you pick it up from there.
Yeah. And so, we would have, in those heavy project planning structures, we would have, a 30-page requirements document of maybe even just for a small feature within an application. Just so that you don't have those arguments when, you complete the work and someone says, that's not what I wanted. Well, here's what it says in the requirement. It said it was supposed to be that way. And just so hopefully if you are handing work off to other teams, if you're handing work offshore, that you've given the people doing the work enough information to complete it successfully. But long timelines. So with Agile, the idea was that we needed to shorten those timelines and shorten those feedback loops. So a couple of the components of that was going to what they call sprints. So a lot of times sprints, we typically do 2-week sprints. I think that's a pretty common one. Some people do 1 week, some people do 3 weeks, and you can change that to another core tenet of Agile is you can change things within your team to make it work by learning. Every sprint you learn something. Hey, what didn't go right? What went right? So sprints give you that tight feedback loop. If you plan 2 weeks worth of work, you do 2 weeks worth of work, you review what you did, and you plan your next 2 weeks. So you're getting stuff in front of a user or a tester much faster. You're able to respond to problems. If you found out this thing you thought was easy is incredibly hard, it's going to take more time. You can adjust resourcing. You can adjust as you go kind of towards that mark. I mean, you're still working toward a end of project or quarterly or something like that.
And at first there is probably a larger goal. We need to get this portion of this project done in some amount of time. There is a bigger picture, but it's probably mostly accurate and not super concerned if it's eyelash or atomic accurate. Like we have 6 months to get this amount of work done. And now you're talking about how you break the larger ambition into smaller, tighter cycles, which means you're writing smaller pieces of code at a time. You're developing functionality in smaller bits, making sure they work or meet those requirements, and then maybe expanding them from. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah.
And with Agile, a lot of people talk about MVPs or minimum viable products, and just getting something done, something that you can be completed and shared. So instead of going away for 6 months and we're going to build this website that's going to do X, Y, Z, maybe the first 2 weeks you build the login page and you can show people that you can log in. Now, are you done? Are you ready to sell your product? No, but you've figured out some problems. You've probably ironed out some issues. You've got that done. You aren't going to get to the end of your project and then say, "Oh, we can't log in," right? Because you've built that incremental work.
You've made a real key point. I mean to interject here. There's a key point going on here that I think is very critical. You're doing the work as a coder and you're showing it to some level of stakeholder, which is not a coder. Right. So you're getting more rapid, more incremental feedback from the person who may end up using this solution or knows who will.
Right.
And so go back to your login screen. They might say, yeah, that's great, but there's not the ability to reset my password if I forget it.
Right.
And you might say, good point, and you might add that to your next sprint session. You might not do it in this sprint. So the feedback loop, I can't emphasize enough of getting an incremental thing. And I'm going to let you go for a minute. I'm going to talk about a famous story from our career where that didn't happen, but keep going.
Yeah. And so within that sprint, what that cadence will look like is you'll come in, you'll plan your sprint, and sprints made up of typically they call user stories. So there's even a very specific framework for user story. If you can say it, instead of a 30-page requirement document, it's as a user role, as a system admin, I need to do X so that Y. And then you can fill in detail and acceptance criteria. So it's not just that sentence, but it does get you a pretty good value added sense of what you're doing. And so you have a list of those user stories that are in your backlog. And that's sort of the things you need to take care of. To your example, you find out that we need to do a reset password. That's a new user story. Put it in the backlog. You work on it when it comes up, right?
Yeah.
And so you do your sprint planning, you size those stories and give a rough feel of how much you can realistically get done in 2 weeks as a team, not as an individual, but as a team. Like, hey, we can do these 4 or 5 stories. And then
I suppose would it be inappropriate for me to mention the phrase Fibonacci sequence?
Yes. And planning poker.
And so, but really, so sort of buried in what you're saying, and I understand it, is you're estimating things, but not to the minute. You're saying, I think this is bigger than a bread box or smaller than a bread box.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
This. I think I estimate this is really hard. I estimate this is really easy. You're not hung up in is it 12 hours or 14 hours or 15 and a half hours? The planning is more like that. Would you
say? And I think,
and you could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think you try to stay away from the hours. Now, one place we can talk about opinion is at some point people want to think in terms of hours and days. Yeah. And I don't care if you think it's a bread box. Can you have it this week or in
But
a
they're
month.
buckets of hours is what I mean.
Exactly.
You're saying like a medium we think is 10 hours, and you don't like say, yeah, but this one's 11. You just say, yeah, 10's close enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So the planning is much more rapid and much more estimate based.
Yeah. And to your point about planning with the Fibonacci sequence is that the bigger something gets, the less precise your estimate is. So, the Fibonacci is 1. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 8? Is it 13? Is it 20? Is it too big to figure out? And that's once you kind of get over that 13, 20, that's probably too big. We need to break this up into smaller components. So you miss smaller, right? You don't estimate 100 hours and miss by 100 hours.
Yeah, but literally, you're not being held accountable if you're off by a half hour or an hour. No. You're just getting things directionally right. And if you're wrong, the penalties are small, not large. I would say, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think, and the goal with those short cycles also is that instead of estimating a whole project out, you make your estimates and you do 2 weeks worth of work, and you get better at estimating. Every time we do a new screen, that's at least 8. That's at least a day. Every time we do a new database table, that's going to be a half a day because of X, Y, and Z. And so you start to learn those things that, so your estimates get better as you go because you can repeat that cycle.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about sort of maybe how the team operates on a weekly basis. But let me pause and just catch up. So you've got a big plan. You've got to get something done in a period of time. You break that work down into what are called user stories, which are just essentially functionality, but expressed in very human terms. This kind of user will need to do this kind of thing. This kind of user will need to be a different kind of thing. You then roughly estimate each of those user stories on a complexity, and now you've got a long list of those. Then you come into a sprint planning, which you said might be 2 weeks of planning. You're going to say, during this 2 weeks, which of these user stories do I think I can get done, or I can get done, you can get done, and you pull those off, and they're now a part of that sprint. You still got a bunch you haven't done. They're still on the list. You haven't even maybe estimated them, but then you go and do that work. And then while you're in that 2 weeks, tell me a little bit about what the team is doing to sort of stay on track.
Yeah. So within that, the core, they talk a lot about ceremonies in Agile. So sprint planning is a ceremony. Daily stand-up.
It's like the brisket ceremony.
Brisket on the board. Yep.
Brisket on the board. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So your daily stand-up is really your key ceremony for a Scrum or Agile team. So it's if you have, and we try to keep those teams small. That's another key component of, if you have 100 people in that meeting, obviously that's going to take forever.
Amen, brother.
It's really supposed to take about 15 minutes. The reason it's called a stand-up is that when they first started doing that in in-person work environments, is that they would have it in a room without a table and chairs, so that everyone kind of has the urgency of standing up and you go around the room and you give your updates. What I worked on yesterday, what I'm working on today, and is there anything that's blocked or blocked?
And you're not diving too deep into, and it's because Bob didn't give me the thing, just what your blockers are, and your tight communication.
And a lot of times you can sort of, whoever's leading that, you'll call it a scrum master, sort of can take those blockers, or we'll call them parking lots, offline. And when everyone's done with their update, they can kind of go back through those of, hey, Bob and Joe, you guys stick around. We'll try to figure out your blocker, or I'll take that offline. I'll take that wherever, whoever we need to get to deal with that.
Yeah. So there's the collaboration is a key part of Agile. The team is collaborating with itself very frequently, so no one's missing out on the fact that they're blocked by something, and they can solve those problems rapidly. And again, part of the collaboration, like we said earlier, was showing your work to people within the sprint so they can validate it and keep going. So very much emphasis on collaboration as well. Yeah.
And to that point, within that team, it is a cross-functional team usually, especially if it's a well-organized team. So you'll have your developers, your testers, if you have independent testers, product owner, which is kind of that key role we talked about, of the person that's the voice of the user, the voice of the customer, of what does this application need to do. So they can sort of put that ear to it of what does this really need to do? What's important? What's that feature I asked for is really difficult. Do we really need it? That feature I asked for is taking a long time, but it's essential, so that participant's really important. And it's not just developers amongst themselves.
Yep. Yeah. So I want to tell a story from our career real quickly that's the opposite of that. But again, Agile is just this, it's a modern way of working that realizes that software can be developed incrementally, it can be torn down and rebuilt. And it's not like building a house or launching a rocket to space. And so it's very useful. Anything else you want to add on just kind of the Agile primer before I give this example?
I think just one thing at the end of the, so you complete that sprint, and then there's 2 ceremonies at the end of a sprint review where you can kind of show what you did to a stakeholder. And then a sprint retrospective where you amongst the team that's doing the work can talk about what went right, what went wrong. So you learn for next sprint, maybe how to plan different, maybe how to size different, maybe there's some blockers need to get prioritized ahead of what you plan to work on before. So maybe you need to move your stand up to a different time of day because people can't come, right? Just learning how to make your process better every cycle, and you repeat that loop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just very iterative, and you like it, right? Compared to the waterfall, what's called the waterfall, which is kind of all the front load planning. Yep.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's it can always be done wrong. Every process has its downfalls, but I think the reactivity and the humility with which to get requirements and figure out what to do, because everyone I know is better at making adjustments small once they can see something, right?
Yeah.
Very few of us are good at making a big plan far out and really understanding what the application is going to do, how they want it to work, beyond like a pencil sketch level, right? Once you start to see things, you start to learn, what would make more sense. And that having that ability to make quick decisions and adjust small is incredibly helpful.
Yep.
And the flip side, one more thing that I think is important is with that 2-week cycle, if you're doing it right, you also sort of short circuit the infinite project where a product owner keeps thinking of new things, which is great, but you can never finish a thing because there's always one more thing that was thought of. So we have that user story to your password example. You did complete the login page story. It's done. Now there's a new story to add password reset to it. So you do get that sense of accomplishment of, okay, we got that done. You had a new idea halfway through the sprint. Great. We'll do it. We'll start at next sprint. And so you don't have that things that can just never get done, never get all the way tested. And then, so if you want to be deploying software often, you have to be able to get things done and start a new thing, right?
And small chunks better than big chunks, almost always, whenever you can. General life advice, bite off things in small chunks.
Yep.
That's essentially Agile. And talk often. Communicate frequently. This is like marital advice, frankly. Anyway, when we come back, I'm going to tell you about a story from our career where the opposite happened in Agile and why it was bad. And I'm going to give you a non-developer use of Agile in your company that you might find useful for your project. We'll be right back after this short break. Hey everybody, welcome back to the last IT podcast in the world. We're talking about Agile. Darrick's just talked about Agile from a developer's perspective, and I'm going to talk about it from a non-developer, even an accountant's or an operations manager's perspective here in a minute. But first of all, here's why you need Agile. At one point in our career, Darrick, there was a project where there was a module within some software that's being used that just needed some improvement. It just needed to get better. It was old or whatever, and the people who used this, out in the actual locations were clamoring for change and they had good input. So here's what the company did. They flew all of those subject matter experts that use that software every day to HQ, maybe up to 10 of them, like a big deal. Like we're going to give you a say. We want your opinion. Please come to HQ. So they brought them all to HQ. They sat in a room for days, I think, talking about what they needed to improve this module software. People listening intently, and I'm sure there were flip charts, and I'm sure people used sticky notes to vote on features and did them on a whiteboard. They did the whole, both the dog, yes, and the pony for these people. And I'm sure listened with the very, very best of intentions. And then they said, thank you very much. And they put them all on planes and they flew them home and said, we'll get back to you. So when we talk about artifacts, in the first segment, we talked about artifacts. What do we mean by artifacts is writing long documents, Word documents, or PowerPoint presentations that aren't work, but describe work that you'd like to do. And Agile really emphasizes more. It's not that there's no artifacts. There's fewer and less detailed artifacts. So you don't have to say, here's my 40-page document of what I want the module to do. And probably for this example I'm giving from our career, that document probably ended up being, I'm sure, more than 100 pages long. So it's a very complicated software module with a lot of needs that needed improving. And they drank from a fire hose when they had those field people in, and they wrote it all down, and then they commenced work. And then about 6 months later, they flew them all back in, and they did what I call the ta-da moment. They went, remember 6 months ago when you told us to work? And then we haven't spoken since. They went, ta-da! And you'll never guess what happened. I know you know what's happened. The people whose feedback they had gathered at first said, this is all wrong. This is not, like, that won't work, and this won't work, and why didn't you ask me about that? And just, it was literally a failure. But that is the old process. That's the non-Agile process. Get a bunch of feedback, write code like mad, and then reveal it with the big, ta-da flourish. Right. As opposed to, hey, based on what you said, does this work? As you said, when people can't always imagine everything they need, but when they see things, they can say, now that I see this, I thought of 3 more things that are very important. And they hadn't done that. So this waterfall, heavy artifact, let's write it all down, let's just code, and then show you, generally doesn't work. By the way, it doesn't work even when you're building a house. Like, if you build a house, you're going to walk through it when it's framed.
Right.
And you're going to say, you know what? This door doesn't open the way I thought it was now that I can see the physical world.
Right. Exactly.
And you might change it. Now, house building isn't really built for Agile, but even then, you need a feedback loop that the old style didn't really provide. So I don't know if you remember that story or have anything to add.
That was epic.
Yeah. So that was the opposite of Agile, where there's not tight collaboration, there's not a tight feedback loop, there's not a tight planning loop, and you end up with those kind of results. But let's talk about what I would call modified Agile. So I have been with ERP implementation partners that used a modified version of Agile for standing up and implementing a brand new ERP system. And here's some differences from developer Agile. First of all, your core team is not just IT and technical people, because the work to do on an ERP is configuration choices. Do you want the system? The system can do X, Y, or Z. Here are the pros and cons of doing X or Y or Z. What do you want to do? And you need your accounting leads for that. You need your operations leads for that. You need maybe sales and marketing for that. So first of all, your project team in a modified ERP Agile project, and it doesn't have to just be for ERP, it can just be for any software, is going to be, by definition, cross-functional and not just technical.
Right.
You'll also be doing things like, we're going to load our master data. We're going to take our old item master from the old system. We're going to load it into the new one. We need someone to validate that. That's business people. And by the way, the item master crosses 4 or 5 or 6 different functional lines. So it's cross-functional. So the point is, you do know the tasks you need to do. So you've got your big project plan laid out. You've got a bunch of tasks. They may not be expressed as user stories. They may be more traditional tasks. But then you go into sprint planning, just like you said. The one I was on did 3-week sprint plannings. And so we'd say, what are we going to get done in these 3 weeks? And everyone had work to do. Accountants had work to do to validate the system or to learn how to maintain the chart of accounts. And we just bit that off. And at first, it was very hard for people who weren't familiar with Agile, because then at the end of that 3 weeks, you have to plan out your next 3 weeks. What are we going to do this 3 weeks? And what's your availability? And which things are we going to pull off the board? So you still are pulling tasks off. You still are making commitments. We did stand-ups once or twice a week for about 30 minutes because the teams tend to be bigger on an ERP project. But again, it's cross-functional and you're communicating often and you're starting to get a feel for people who aren't really engaged. This is very, very useful. You can tell within about 2 sprints who's thinking this project will succeed without them having to do hardly anything. And Agile brings accountability.
It does.
Because we're all saying, like, did you get your stuff done? Yes, I did, or no, I didn't. And it's not harsh. It's just, hey, we're all in this together. Did you do your work? And that accountability tends to drive good action. It's also useful if your ERP go live date has a month or 3 flexibility.
Right.
Like if you don't have a hard, because maybe you estimated that it would be 11 sprints and maybe it's going to be 12. And you don't know that till you get more into the sprints, but it essentially, in its own high level way, does some of those things you mentioned. It takes a big thing, breaks it into smaller chunks. It uses some of the Agile tools to keep track of what's called burn down, or how you're doing and completing tasks. It increases collaboration. A very interesting side benefit is because it is so cross-functional, your needs for formal training are less because people are logging onto the system on day one. That's another benefit.
As testers
instead of at month 8, we will show you the system. Ta-da! The accounting is on the system week 1, doing very rudimentary setup things. Operations is on doing very rudimentary validation of maybe some setup. Then in sprint 2 or 3, they're doing some very rudimentary, very happy path testing of the most basic sales order entry. Maybe by sprint 4, they're doing PO receiving. Maybe by sprint 5, you're starting to do like reporting or integrations or other things. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but by the time you get to UAT, user acceptance test, which is your dress rehearsal, and go live, again, people have been touching and seeing the system, not just hearing about it, not just waiting for the ta-da moment, waiting for the IT and the consultants. Man, tangent. Some companies think that the ERP project is going to be IT plus external consultants. Your project will fail. I will bet you $100 if it's ERP.
Yeah, that's not a good recipe.
System. So anyway, it basically takes the planning aspects of it, the incremental aspects, the collaboration aspects, the accountability aspects, the reduction of artifacts. You're just getting work done, not writing about getting work done, and it leverages those things. Does that make? Do you have any like project Agile question?
No, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about the fact that your stakeholders sort of become your evangelists and your trainers because of the work they put in testing and doing setup. That's a great point.
Yeah. And again, initially what you find by the end of the project, the 2 experiences that I had with it, the users loved it, got it, but it's a little bit harder a concept to understand at first. You drink it, eat it, sleep it, so you know it. I'm familiar with it, but this idea of accountability and that I've got to sort of like tell people but it really does work. I really recommend it over waterfall, which means lots of upfront planning, then doing, and then testing, as opposed to sort of doing and testing, doing and testing, doing and testing. I should have mentioned testing becomes sort of an
integral to that process.
Thing. Little configurations and little data loads on an ERP project, plus little tests, lots of little successful tests adds up to a big successful test, you hope, if you've done it right. So very incremental. I'm a dedicated incrementalist. If you can do things incrementally instead of all at once,
absolutely.
I'm a big fan in IT space.
And when you do get to those, you get close to your end of your project, to find out that you have 90% of your application completely good, or 90% of your ERP completely right, and you have 10% that you need to keep working on, is a much better feeling than to find out that you have it all done and it's all a little bit broken. That's much rather be in the first situation.
100%. So, write us at podcast@alt-co.com if you've got comments on Agile or ERP. By the way, I've seen people bashing Agile for ERP implementations on LinkedIn. And I'm sure those people have some experience I don't know about, but I'm in the other camp. Like you stand Buc-ee's, I stand
Agile for ERP.
Modified Agile-ish for ERP or other large software implementation projects that aren't necessarily code heavy, are configuration and data loading heavy. So, and I'd love to give people advice on how to do that. And so when you're looking at software and you're working with a partner, ask them what their project implementation methodology is. Ask them if they use Agile at all, or if it's waterfall. And then you make your decision. They might have good reasons for one or the other, but I think that's an important question to ask any software provider.
Yep, absolutely.
Very good. Okay, time for the What Did You Learn this segment. Darrick, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned you're excited but curious about the new Buc-ee's coming in. I'm hoping that you'll like that experience. Learned a lot about the Agile process for ERP. Like I said, that's not my wheelhouse where I've done that a lot, but some really cool stuff and how that can work.
You'd recognize it if you saw it. Like there'd be some elements you'd definitely see that you'd recommend. Yeah. And I learned from you, not about you, about the barbecue board. And now, the brisket board, board. And now I am totally pumped to go to Buc-ee's and do that. So thank you, Texas. And thank you, Darrick, for the primer on Buc-ee's and on Agile. Like, aren't you glad that Agile came along in your career and
so glad
and improved the way things get done? Those were some smart people that thought about that. I'm glad you learned. I learned a lot about sort of the developer world of Agile from you as well.
Yeah, it's a good process.
And you can put Agile into your life. Like, so if you're going to plan out a trip across the USA, you could either plot out exact distances you're going to drive every day and reserve hotels all the way across the country. That would be waterfall, right?
Right.
Or you could say, you know what, I'm going to plan out the first 2 day stays or 1 day stay.
Sometimes just go Buc-ee's to Buc-ee's, and that'll get you where you need to go.
The Buc-ee's Grand Tour, by the way, can only get you as far west as northern Colorado.
Yeah. I think you can get all the way to Florida. You could go depending where you go. In Florida, yeah.
You could maybe make it through Texas to Florida, but and the Agile way of seeing America coast to coast would be to allow yourself to say, you know what, here's a cool thing I'm going to take a detour and spend a half a day at, and I'm going to readjust my schedule a little bit. But we're still going to get to the other side of the U.S. in 14 days, right?
Yep.
More Agile. So.
Yep.
Very cool. All right. Good to see you again on the podcast, my friend.
Likewise.
And to everyone else, we'll see you next time on the last IT podcast in the world.